Mark is also leaving open the question we began with. Is there a resurrection? Do people rise from the dead? John's body, the great man of God, even he has been laid in a tomb. Is there any hope for God's people who are excluded from the halls of power because they're humble servants and truth tellers? Is there any future for the heralds, for God's messengers, if they come against a resistant world? Is there any human leader who really pleases God by leading with justice and righteousness and compassion? Mark answers that story with number 2. There is a faithful shepherd who hosts a banquet, giving life. A faithful shepherd who hosts a banquet, giving life. And this is our conclusion this morning. So stay with me as I read through the next story. The apostles, verse 30, gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Is there any hope for these apostles in such a gruesome world? For these disciples? Then, because so many people were coming and going, they didn't even have time to eat, a chance to eat. There's sacrifice there. Jesus said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Jesus doesn't lead us into turmoil. He leads us into rest. He leads us into solitude with Him because He is our source. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them, the disciples, and they ran on foot from all the towns, and they got there ahead of the disciples. Jesus landed and He saw a large crowd. Is there any hope for the peoples who are looking for a leader? Any hope for the crowds? Yes, there is, because Jesus had compassion on them. He wasn't threatened by them. He had compassion on them. Why? Because they were like sheep without a shepherd. They were a people in need of godly leadership. There was none to be found. So He began to teach them many things. Verse 35, by this time it was late in the day, so His disciples came to Him. This is a remote place, they said. It's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and the villages and buy themselves something to eat. Let them fend for themselves, Jesus. But He answered, you give them something to eat. That's what I've called you to do, is to serve them. You serve them. And they said to Him, well, that would take more than a half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. Go and see. And they went and found out, and they said, 5 and 2 fishes. And then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. I love these notes because Mark is reminding us of a shepherd king who leads people into rest, who leads people to the green grass. He leads them in organization. He leads them as His armies, as His servants, as His people. He leads them into places of provision and compassion and teaching and truth and comfort. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Verse 41, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, He gave thanks and He broke the loaves. Then He gave them to His disciples to distribute to all the people. He divided the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up the 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. And the number of men who had eaten was 5,000. What is Mark saying without re-preaching this whole passage? He is saying that unlike the kings of this world, Jesus leads His followers with divine compassion and provision. You have a place at the banquet of God, and it's a life-giving banquet. It's not a banquet that ends in death. You have a king who takes care of his flock. You have a king who fills the longing of our hearts for godly leadership. He fulfills the hopes of Israel. He teaches with prophetic truth. He satisfies with abundance. He has miraculous power to multiply and to give life. And he invites us into his service, not to dominate us, but to delegate his power to us for our good. Jesus is the shepherd king who cares for people with compassion and provision. Jesse's coming to the keys, and I would invite you to bow your heads and close your eyes. Lord, we thank you for your word. Even its difficult parts, its gruesome parts, have a point of preaching and teaching for us. And Lord, though we've paused to see some things in negative terms, said in negative ways, I'm so grateful for the feeding of the 5,000. I'm so grateful we look ahead to Jesus, who loves us with compassion, who's patient. With all of our clamoring around him, with all of our need, he's able to provide what we need. Starting deep within our hearts, deep within our souls, deep within the longings that we have. Jesus, you are able to satisfy what we need. How many of you know that ultimately Jesus doesn't seek to preserve power for himself? But what do we learn? We learn that the good shepherd gives up his life for the sheep.
Thank you for watching our video. If you liked it, share it with a friend and subscribe to our channel. We go live every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks again for watching.